If you had a time machine, what is the first place you would visit? For me, I just want to go back 70 minutes and relive the Better Call Saul season finale one more time, fresh eyes, because it was a beautiful, poignant, heartbreaking, somehow absolutely hilarious, but overall just an utterly satisfying, enthralling episode of TV. Such a perfect, fitting conclusion for the character of Saul Goodman, for the show Better Call Saul, but also another great epilogue, just like El Camino, for Breaking Bad. Oh wait, sorry, the time machine is just a fun framing device. You just want to ask me about regrets. Oh, I've got some regrets. So many regrets. Hey guys, I'm Jax, and this is my spoiler review for Better Call Saul's final episode. So the series finale is finally here, and it's titled Saul Gone. That's right, folks. They did a pun. They did a fun pun with the word soul, and that warms my heart. It's just such a great title, and as the title says, Saul Gone, folks. It's all over. It's all done, and honestly, I couldn't be more satisfied. I think this episode worked on so many different levels. I loved every single flashback. I thought the whole kind of conceit of the episode and the whole kind of Saul defends himself in court, and we get to see the Saul Goodman side of him, but then we get to see kind of the Jimmy McGill side of him at the end. So much of this show has been a lawyer show, so to have one final court case, that of Saul Goodman, the trial of Saul Goodman, the United States versus Saul Goodman, it's just so perfectly fitting, and I love how we just get straight to it. We don't have to spend a whole, first act of Saul Goodman, the fugitive. We get a really fun kind of opening scene where he's running away from Marion. Also, just the idea that he gets caught so quickly from an elderly lady who kind of dobs him in and calls the police feels so fitting. I feel like rewatching the early seasons now, where he's helping all these elderly folk and stuff, it's just going to have such a kind of, I don't know, just such a well-rounded kind of, I don't know, beginning and end kind of bookend to it all. I really, really like that. So we have him running about doing a bit of a fugitive situation, and then he jumps in a big old dumpster, and almost immediately I just screamed when his diamonds just go flying everywhere, and he's just crawling around like the little cockroach he is in all the slime and filth and rubbish, and he's trying to find all these diamonds, trying to find these little bits of money in this pile of trash. That's got to be a metaphor or something, right? And I just love how it's like, immediately they're just like, knock, knock. Get out of the dumpster, Saul Goodman. And he's caught. Just like that, within 5 minutes, he's caught. And suddenly, you realize what the episode is going to be. The trial of Saul Goodman. I also just love how almost immediately he's like, this can't be how it ends. This can't be how it ends. This is crazy. I got caught like this. And it's like, what were you thinking, Saul? And it just feels so kind of a perfect way to end his character. Getting caught in a dumpster. Looking for diamonds in this big pile of rubbish. It's such a glorious way for him to be captured. I really thought it was such a brilliant way to start the episode. And then almost immediately we're into the trial and we get our first huge surprise cameo, Marie. Am I the only one that really wants to see some behind the scenes of that scene with Marie? Just to be like, does she still wear purple? Or after Hank, did she go, maybe I wore a bit too much purple. Maybe I'll wear a darker black or something. Or maybe she just switched it up and she's just a green girl now. I did not expect to see Marie, but it was a really pleasant surprise. When I say pleasant, I mean it was horrible and sad and very depressing to see the character, but really fun to see the actress back. It was kind of a really nice feeling of oh, that's right, this isn't just an end to Better Call Saul, this is also our second epilogue to Breaking Bad, and potentially our last epilogue or our last thing in Breaking Bad. So it was a really nice way for her to kind of come back and remind us that, yes, we're ending Better Call Saul, but also we're ending Breaking Bad and all the things that happened throughout Breaking Bad, and I really liked how prevalent that all was, but it also didn't lose sight of all the Better Call Saul things. It so carefully and cleverly kind of rode that line of being a finale for two shows in a way which is just really, really fun, and I think expertly kind of crafted. I mean, of course it's expertly crafted. This show has almost always been fantastic, but series finales can always be really hard to kind of stick the landing. For instance, I infamously think that every episode of Breaking Bad is pretty much perfect, and the finale is maybe my least favorite. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it didn't really stick the landing in a satisfying way, so I was kind of left with oh god, that's just so good! Oh, the way every other episode kind of makes me feel. Whereas this, it's just glorious. And it really comes down to the main thing of what is this episode? It's the trial of Saul Goodman. And who's he gonna get to represent him? Better Call Saul, baby. Bang, bang. But also, who's he going to get as the lawyer on the side, who's there as an associate friend, whatever, lawyer man, who he's just essentially there for fun to be like, remember Bill? I remember Bill, and Bill's back! And it's so glorious to have him back. He's just so funny. He's just such an opposite to Saul Goodman. It was really funny seeing him try to kind of weasel his way out as Saul kind of does that turn later in the episode in the actual trial. He's just such a great character. It was really fun to see him back, despite all the atrocities and horrors that Saul Goodman has committed, that Slippin' Jimmy / Saul Goodman / Gene have committed. I still found it so much fun, him representing himself, him using his lawyer skills and all his kind of, quick-witted talking and just knowing the law and how to bend it and twist it for his criminal purposes and get himself down to a 7 years, which seems impossibly small, but I guess the whole point is that, like, he's down to something where that's manageable. 7 years is manageable. So it's really more of like, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. It's neither here nor there. And you know what? Surprise, surprise, I'm actually not a lawyer, so I have no idea what I'm talking about. It just seemed like a very short amount for all the crimes they know he's done, and he's pleading guilty. But it just comes down to that way he presents himself, the way he talks, where they're like, you reckon a jury's gonna believe that sob story? Also, I love that his sob story, where they don't actually know how truthful he's being, but he's being super truthful up until that point that we see in, like, the last couple episodes of Better Call Saul called Breaking Bad, where he manipulates and twists the situation and immediately is like, ooh, I can make money from these criminal meth guys. But so much of his story is true, so it kind of feels true the way he's talking about it, and I just love that thing. It's like, you reckon the whole jury's gonna believe you? No. Maybe one. Maybe one will. And you've never lost before, so you don't want to lose again. You don't want to lose. And he's just playing on their ego, playing on their, like, characterization. And I just found that so exciting, so fun to see Saul have one final Saul Goodman go at it as a lawyer. And it was really just so much fun. And it was also kind of terrifying to be like, oh my God, he's going to get off. Like, we're going to see him in prison. There's going to be a montage, maybe the final Better Call Saul montage. And then we're going to have scenes with him outside of prison. Like, that's crazy. And that moment where he's talking to them, where he does the sob story, it feels so emotional, it feels so raw and real. And then suddenly he's just like, I'm gonna get one, juror. You just watch me. Better Call Saul's back at it, baby. Bang, bang, bang. And it's just like, oh, he's so insidious. He's so two-faced. There's so many scenes in this show where he's just bearing his soul, bearing his heart out. And then suddenly, that mask he puts on, that Saul Goodman mask, just comes over, and it just fully kind of consumes him, and it's terrifying and kind of exciting to watch, but just horrifying. He's just, I don't know, it feels like there's no heart left to him. But then he whips out one final card, the Howard card, and he finds out that Kim has done what she did last episode. She admitted everything, and now she's going to get done by Mrs. Howard Hamlin. And that is the moment we finally get a little taste of Jimmy McGill, and he finally comes back. The Jimmy McGill he was always trying to be, but he kept falling into that slipping Jimmy Saul Goodman persona through the whole course of this show, and we finally see that underneath all the flashy suits and ties and color and that kind of big character that is Saul Goodman, there is James McGill underneath it all with a heart of gold, and he admits everything. He gets 86 years and he protects Kim, and it's just, I don't know, it's almost like a little cheesy, but I just found it so satisfying because throughout the whole episode, we get these flashbacks, first with Mike, then with Walter White. Walter White's back in a glorious scene where he is just chewing the scenery, just yelling at Saul about time travel and how stupid it is, which was just so funny. Like, perfect use of him, so funny, but then it kind of digs into that heart of that kind of character where he's asking these characters, under the sci-fi fun guise of time travel, do they have any regrets? Because clearly Saul has the most regrets, but he still can't admit his regrets to any of these characters that he hasn't necessarily grown to love, but he's grown to know them at least in a way that he doesn't really know anyone else, but he can't admit those regrets. And so in that final, like, courtroom scene, he just unloads all these regrets in a way where he just admits the truth and he saves Kim. Clearly Kim being his biggest regret, her having to give up her life and all these things because of the Slippin' Jimmy, Slippin' Kimmy personas just becoming too toxic and just not working for each other, and Howard dying. And I just found it so fascinating, so interesting, and so clever to bring up the idea of regrets, just to keep reminding us he has all these regrets, and Saul Goodman is almost created out of those regrets and those kind of not being able to deal with situations and just kind of doubling down, tripling down into this insane fake persona that has become his real life and his real persona. The mask becomes the man and all that stuff. Other good words and phrases that fit the character. And so Saul gets what he deserves, but also there's this really interesting kind of bittersweetness to it all, where it's like, yes, he deserves that, but he's being punished in a way where it's like, yes, it's been punishment, you're in prison, that's awful. But as soon as he gets on that bus, it's very clear he's not going to have the worst time in prison. He's not like a cop or this or that. He was like on that side of it all with them all, but he was not a criminal lawyer. He was a criminal lawyer, to quote Jesse back in that first episode he appeared in. And so they all know him. He's like a superstar. It's like having a famous person on the bus and they all recognize him. And if you wanted them to say the title of the series once or twice this episode, you're in luck, guys, because they say it about 100 times. They don't just say it, they chant it. Better Call Saul. Boom, 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 boom. Oh my God. That moment was just glorious. It was so twisted and perverse in this way, where it's like all these criminals on this bus going to prison are chanting his name like he's this cult leader, like he's this superstar god. And Saul's just like, whoa, what's going on at first? He doesn't really like the recognition that they all notice him. But then that moment of like, there's a little sly smile there. And it's a really fun bookend of him baking goods in the first episode, in that first scene, and in the last scene, we see him in prison baking goods, using his Cinnabon skills. And that's really, really fun. Just a nice little kind of a bookend there. And he's using his Cinnabon skills and he goes to meet Kim, and just everyone is just like, hey, Saul Goodman, Better Call Saul, baby, bang, bang, bang. And it's clear that he's kind of having a great time in prison. Not like a great time, but he's not having that kind of awful prison time where he's getting beaten up, he's scared for his life and all these kind of things. And you can kind of imagine that over time he could kind of start helping people with like getting off and using his lawyer skills to help people who are in prison and all that kind of Saul Goodman stuff. Because yes, he said, hey, I'm James McGill and I'm actually the best lawyer in the world. But you can still kind of see in that last scene where the bus is chanting his name, Better Call Saul, baby. I don't know. I just feel like it's a really fun kind of like tease where it's like you don't see him doing any of this stuff, but you can imply and infer that that could definitely happen in the future. And I found that really satisfying because it doesn't end with him being like, I'm in the prison bin, Better Call Saul, baby, bam, bam, bam. I'm a lawyer. It's actually the best time. I'm having the best time in prison. You can totally read it where it's like, well, he's in prison. He's going to have the worst time ever. Maybe that was the last time he's ever going to see Cameron. All these things, or you can kind of see it the other way. So it's nice and open-ended, even though it is completely closed and shut, where he's got 86 years and he's never going to leave prison. So it's like, there is a definitive ending, but what happens in prison and how you kind of interpret what's going to happen from here in prison for the rest of his life is up to however you read the situation and the show and the character. And I find that really, really exciting as an ending. So we get 3 flashbacks in this final episode, and I think it was such a clever choice of who they brought back and for what kind of scenes. The first 2 are Mike and Walter, and it's the time travel situation where he's like, time travel, baby, what regrets do you have? And Mike just kind of answers. He gives the perfect classic Mike answer where he's like, I really regret just being, you know, that first moment I became a criminal cop and I took that bribe and that's led him all the way here. And it is that kind of classic heart of gold situation. But also, you kind of do remember that, like, yeah, well, that was the moment he became a bad guy. Like, it's easy to forget that he's a bad guy, but he's a bad guy. And that was that moment that he became that bad guy. His son died and all the horrors that continued and, you know, followed from that. And he's just a man filled with regret. And Saul, of course, just says some stupid thing about money. And money is everything to Saul for almost the entire series, except for Kim. And I think that's why it works so perfectly, where we get the kind of cheesy ending where it's like, I'll sacrifice myself and go to prison forever for Kim. And I think that first scene really reinforces it. It's also just such a striking beginning where you see the car and it's rotting and it's old and just all those moments from that big episode where you, like the Bagman episode, and it was just kind of like, it's in color for one, and it was just so like, wait, what is happening? What are we going to get here? And then when you start realizing what the scene is, it's a brilliant way to start the final episode of this show. And then we get the Walter White scene. It is so clever to bring back Walter White, the main character of the other show, for a final scene with Saul, and to have them in that moment where they're confined together because they would have been having these type of conversations. And it just really felt like a perfect use of both these 2 characters. Walter just does his whole big, I'm better than you, I'm smarter than you, I'm the science guy, stay in your lane, Saul, and just rips him a new one about time travel, which is really, really fun. But then we do get a little moment of like him opening up, and then Saul just closes down. He doesn't say anything. He talks about one of his Slip and Jimmy scams and all this just Saul Goodman bullshit, and we get the most tragic, heartbreaking, devastating line from Walter White where he's like, oh, you were always Saul Goodman. which is just so heartbreaking and tragic, because on the one hand, he was always destined and like hopelessly and tragically destined to become Saul Goodman. But at the same time, he wasn't. He was always inclined that way, but there was just so many situations that we saw over the whole 6 seasons that pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed him, and he just kept trying to fight back, but then at moments he would accept and just embrace, and it twisted him into Saul Goodman. So it's a really heartbreaking line where he kind of on the surface, yes, he was always destined to be that man. He was always kind of born to be Saul Goodman. But at the same time, there were moments where it might not have happened, but due to circumstances and lives and all the situations that are the whole series, it was kind of feels predestined in a way. And I just find that line just so fascinating and interesting. I feel like you can probably read it at an extreme on one end or the other, where Walter's 100% wrong or Walter's 100% right. I kind of feel like it's right in the middle, perfectly nuanced, like this show so cleverly does so often. And yeah, that just really blew me away. It was just kind of a perfect end to that scene. It just kind of left me just like tragically heartbroken after so many laughs in that scene over all that time travel nonsense stuff, which was just glorious to see Bryan Cranston just kind of milk the character and just go absolutely ham for a couple of minutes. It was glorious. And so, of course, we get one flashback with the main character from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Then we get a flashback with the main character of Breaking Bad. And so, of course, we end with a flashback with the main character of Better Call Saul, Chuck. It was really great to see Chuck again. I think it was a very strong scene of just that first time he goes to help him when he's got the electricity kind of paranoia sickness thing going on. And it was just so kind of scary to see them both there, and then having him say at the end, like, we're in a loop, we're just saying the same thing. Every single conversation just kind of ends with the same thing, and that first moment of Saul just being like, I'm going to help you, I'm always going to be here for you. No, I don't really want to sit and chat because you're going to like put me down and say how bad I am at a lawyer and all these things, but I'll be back here tomorrow, I'll always be here for you. And we know that he's not always going to be here for him, like that kind of brotherly friendship, but that estranged, like intense kind of feeling, it's going to grow and grow and grow until Saul, destroys him, and because of that, Chuck kills himself. Like it's a really heartbreaking scene. It was great to see the actor back, but it was really tragic and kind of devastating, and it reminds you of how much has happened and how much is going on with these characters and with Jimmy, and it was really wonderful. So after last week's appearance of Kim, I wondered if that was going to be the last time we saw her in this show, but no, she's in the finale, thank God. It was so great to see her back, but once again, like last week, she really didn't say so much. There is no big confrontation with her and Saul where she condemns him for all the Breaking Bad acts and atrocities and all these things. She really just kind of sits there and listens. We do get a couple of scenes of her boring, mundane, horrific life, and thank God she breaks free of it a little bit, and she goes and she starts volunteering for the local law like firm or clinic or whatever. And that was really great to see Kim kind of starting to claw her way back into being the Kim that we knew, and not being the Kim that has the most boring life in Florida possible. As always, the scenes of Kim saying nothing in the courtroom, those stares she gives to Jimmy, Jimmy gives to her, they're powerful, they're amazing, but the real kind of beautiful end that they both get is that final scene she gets where she does a little slipping Kimmy scam to get into the prison, and they have one final cigarette up against the wall. The prison bars come across in the light, and it just looks so gorgeous. They both share a cigarette. Saul does a little joke. Kim barely says anything, but they share that cigarette, a thing that has happened so often throughout the series. It's such a great callback to these characters and to all the moments throughout the show. It just feels so beautifully fitting, but so tragic, so melancholy. This whole episode was so meticulous and methodical and a slow burn. It was enthralling, but it was this slow burn, and this final scene is no different. It just sits on them having a final cigarette, and then she walks out, we get a big shot of her leaving the prison, Saul stuck behind the bars, and then Saul gives us one last shooting guns, Better Call Saul, bang bang, and then he disappears behind the wall in prison, and that's it. And it's glorious. It's so satisfying. It's so heartbreaking the show is over, but it's so perfect. It's such a perfect end. It is, I think, a much better finale than Breaking Bad. I don't really want to get into that argument here, though. I just think that all the issues with what I did have with Breaking Bad, I feel like they fixed here. And I feel like this just so cleverly works for that character. It is so satisfying on so many levels. I am floored by this entire series. It is easily the best prequel series of all time. It's probably the best prequel anything of all time. It is very sad. It's going to be a sad couple of hours as I realize that there is no more Better Call Saul and we might be done with this universe forever. Who knows? There's always a chance they'll come back. But if this is the very end and this is the final episode for this entire universe, I am satisfied.